There's actually a lot of theories about how Cheongsam or qipao, the term, came about. One of them is that it came from the Manchurian robe. The Manchurian were referred to as the banner people, Qiren. Naturally, when the women started wearing qipao, they started referring to their dress as the Manchurian robe qipao. Cheongsam in Cantonese means Changshan in Chinese, which means the long robe kind of dress that men usually would have worn in Qing Dynasty and also early Republican era. Towards the end of Qing Dynasty, the Manchurian women were very much influenced by the Chinese way of dressing, which was very long sleeve and baggy sleeves. And the Chinese women were also very much influenced by the Manchurian way of dressing with the collars and the frog buttons. Also towards the end of Qing Dynasty, there was this fashion to have really decorative borders and really beautiful embroideries all over the robe. And that was very iconic of that period. So after the Qing Dynasty, there was this rise of feminism from the West that was influencing the way they think. Intellectuals especially started to adopt the men's cheongsam as a one-piece robe to signify that they are as empowered and as important as men. And then on the other part, the superstars or the celebrities started adopting cheongsam as well as a fashion statement. Cheongsam was like the symbol of progressive ideology. When Cheongsam first came to Singapore, that would be around the 1910s and 1920s. That was the period when Cheongsam were very much influenced by the Western Vapor style, sort of like a merge between the traditional Chinese silhouette of flat-chested because of chest binding and the Western style, which happened to have this trend of having a flat chest.
The 1930s Cheongsam took quite a dramatic change. It became very long, narrow, cylindrical, and it has evolved to become quite tight-fitting. The other change, I would say, would be the use of sheer fabrics. And I think the entire symbol of the 1930s actually represents a shift in terms of the role of women, as in women wanted to express a very liberal kind of identity. In the 1940s, the Second War broke out. There were no major changes in trends. Women would have worn whatever that they had. The period of 1950s is actually a very exciting period for Cheongsam in Singapore. In fact, I would even think of it as an era of the golden period for Cheongsam in Singapore. And Singapore women at the time were stepping out of their homes and into the public space in different spheres: political, economic, and even social. The narrow, long silhouette of the 1930s Cheongsam actually became even more tight-fitting, and that has a lot to do with Western trends. And that wasped waistline is a symbol of modernity. In the 1960s, the mini dress became a very popular trend. And interestingly, you also see that the cheongsam in Singapore, the hemline becomes to get shorter and shorter. The adoption of very popular Western motifs were also very prominent. And even the use of new fabrics like synthetic, I think it's really easy to maintain and it's very affordable. And that also marks a change in Cheongsam from being a dress that is only affordable to well-to-do families to become an everyday wear for working women in Singapore. The 1950s and 1960s, there are certain features that I would think it is quite Singapore, or I would say Southeast Asia. For example, the use of batik. From the 1950s onwards, very interestingly, I see a lot more cheongsam made using black fabrics. And of course that I would actually associate it with the rise of the little black dress that is very, very popular in the West. By the early 1970s onwards, there was a decline in the trend of wearing cheongsam in Singapore. Women actually prefer ready-to-make garments. So women were not willing to put on such a tight-fitting dress that to them actually restricts their movement. The cheongsam actually revived in the 1990s due to a couple of events. I think one of the more significant ones would be in 1997, Hong Kong was going to be handed over back back to China. So I think that everybody was very conscious of things that were Oriental. And looking at the local context, there was also a concurrent movement. You see some of the local fashion designers, they started to also so-called come up with their own version of a modern Cheongsam. The modern Cheongsam, I think, will always be relevant in our society. The fact that 100 years have passed since it was introduced in the 1920s and is still around actually says a lot about the garment and its importance. The dress itself will always carry different meanings for different people, but it doesn't matter to me as long as you know what it represents for you. And that's the beauty of Cheongsam.